of the Ancient World. Written and published by Ciro Ermisai. Feel free to subscribe for more content. Now let's get into the book. Introduction. In the pantheon of history's great conquerors, Alexander the Great stands as an immortal figure. Born in 356 BCE in the ancient kingdom of Macedonia, he rose swiftly to power and, within a span of just over a decade, created one of the largest empires the world had ever seen. From the age of 20 until his untimely death at 32, Alexander led his army across deserts, through dense forests, and over treacherous mountains, covering more than 20,000 miles and bridging the distance from Greece to the edges of India. But Alexander was more than just a military genius. He was a visionary, driven by a relentless ambition to unify the East and the West under one cultural and political system. Influenced by his teacher Aristotle, Alexander saw himself not only as a conqueror but as a civilizer. He founded over 20 cities, spread Hellenistic culture, and encouraged the exchange of ideas between diverse peoples, setting the groundwork for what would become known as the Hellenistic Age. In this book, we will explore the multifaceted life of Alexander the Great, from his early days under the tutelage of philosophers to his thrilling victories on the battlefield and his ultimate, mysterious death in Babylon. We'll examine not just the military feats but also the personal qualities that fueled his rise, his curiosity, his charisma, and, at times, his ruthlessness. Alongside Alexander, we'll traverse the ancient world, experiencing the grand alliances, fierce loyalties, and betrayals that marked his reign. Why does Alexander's legacy endure? Perhaps because he embodies a timeless archetype, the courageous leader who challenges limits, the figure who envisions unity amid diversity. His life offers insights not only into the ancient world but also into the universal human desire for achievement, glory, and purpose. This introduction to Alexander is only the beginning. As we embark on this journey, prepare to see the ancient world anew through his eyes, witnessing both the triumphs and the sacrifices of an empire builder whose name still echoes through history. Chapter 1. The Roots of a Legend. The story of Alexander the Great begins long before his first battle or his rise to kingship. His roots were firmly planted in the ancient kingdom of Macedonia, a place that, despite its rough and mountainous landscape, produced one of history's most remarkable dynasties. Born in 356 BCE to King Philip II and Queen Olympias, Alexander was thrust into a world shaped by political ambition, cultural traditions, and the art of war. These early influences laid the groundwork for the legendary conqueror he would become. The Macedonian legacy and family influence. Macedonia was a northern Greek kingdom, often viewed by southern Greek city-states with disdain and regarded as rough, even barbaric. However, under King Philip II's transformative leadership, Macedonia rose to become a formidable military and political power. Philip was a man of exceptional vision and an unparalleled strategist. By reorganizing the Macedonian army, creating the powerful phalanx formation, and instituting a permanent standing army, he established the framework that Alexander would later use to stunning effect. Growing up, Alexander witnessed his father's achievements firsthand. Philip's campaigns, military innovations, and his strategic marriage alliances demonstrated to Alexander that effective leadership was as much about strategy and foresight as it was about courage. Yet, Alexander's relationship with his father was complex. Philip was a dominating figure, and Alexander often felt overshadowed, perhaps fueling his own desire to outshine his father. On the other hand, Alexander's mother, Olympias, was equally influential, though in a different manner. A passionate and fiercely ambitious woman, she came from Epirus, a region known for its deep connections to ancient Greek mythology and religious rituals. Olympias instilled in Alexander a sense of divine purpose, convincing him from a young age that he was descended from the god Zeus, which played into Alexander's later self-image and his belief in his destiny to rule over the known world. Olympias was a deeply religious figure, engaging in the mystery rites of Dionysus, which exposed Alexander to a blend of mysticism, prophecy, and a sense of his unique role in the world. Alexander's education under Aristotle. Perhaps one of the most profound influences on young Alexander's mind was his education under Aristotle, the great Greek philosopher. When Alexander was 13, Philip hired Aristotle to tutor him at the Temple of the Nymphs in Mysa, away from the distractions of court. For several years, Alexander and a select group of young Macedonian nobles were immersed in a rigorous program covering philosophy, ethics, politics, medicine, and natural sciences. Aristotle instilled in Alexander a love of learning and a curiosity that would later define his rule. Alexander learned the importance of reason and logic, but he also absorbed Aristotle's views on the superiority of Greek culture, which contributed to his desire to spread Hellenic ideals throughout his empire. Aristotle introduced him to Homer's Iliad, and Alexander became captivated by the hero Achilles, whom he would later see as his own role model. In fact, he reportedly kept a copy of the Iliad with him during his campaigns, seeking inspiration from Achilles' bravery and honor. This education broadened Alexander's view of the world and gave him a sense of cultural superiority, which justified, in his mind, his future conquests. But Aristotle's influence was not without limitations. Although Alexander respected the teacher-student relationship, he often diverged from Aristotle's teachings, particularly in matters of race and integration. While Aristotle believed in the inherent superiority of Greeks over non-Greeks, Alexander later embraced the concept of a multicultural empire, encouraging marriages between his soldiers and Persian women and integrating foreign soldiers into his ranks. Early military training and demonstrations of bravery. Beyond philosophical and academic knowledge, Alexander's youth was filled with rigorous military training, equipping him for the physical and mental demands of leadership. He learned swordsmanship, horsemanship, and how to command troops from a young age. His courage and ambition became evident early in his life, perhaps best exemplified by the famous episode of taming the horse Bucephalus. According to legend, Bucephalus, a large, spirited stallion, was deemed unmanageable with no one able to control him. However, young Alexander noticed that the horse was afraid of its own shadow. With a calm and calculated approach, Alexander turned Bucephalus toward the sun, so the shadow would fall behind him, and then mounted and tamed the horse. This remarkable feat impressed Philip, who is said to have remarked, "My boy, you must find a kingdom big enough for your ambitions. Macedonia is too small for you." This incident was a turning point in Alexander's life. Bucephalus became his loyal companion, carrying him through countless battles, and symbolizing Alexander's unique combination of courage, intelligence, and confidence. Alexander's bold spirit, combined with his keen observational skills, would later enable him to outmaneuver and outwit opponents on the battlefield, earning him an unmatched reputation as a military strategist. The dream of a unified Greece. Philip's ambitions extended beyond Macedonia. He dreamed of uniting the often warring Greek city-states under one rule and leading them in a grand campaign against Persia. This idea of Pan-Hellenism, uniting all Greeks in a common cause, would be inherited by Alexander and ultimately expanded. Philip's conquests set the stage, bringing much of Greece under Macedonian hegemony through either diplomacy or force. By the time of his assassination in 336 BCE, he had nearly achieved his vision. Alexander, however, would inherit not only the throne but also his father's ambitions. Unlike Philip, who was focused primarily on military conquest, Alexander envisioned something more. An empire where Greek culture, language, and values would serve as the foundation of a new, cosmopolitan society. Inspired by both his father's military prowess and his mother's sense of destiny, Alexander believed he could create a lasting legacy that would unify the disparate cultures of Europe, Asia, and beyond. The turning point, Philip's assassination. Alexander's rise to power was accelerated by the sudden assassination of Philip in 336 BCE during a festival in Egi. The circumstances surrounding Philip's death remain mysterious, shrouded in political intrigue and personal vendettas. Some speculate that Olympias may have played a role, given her fierce ambition for her son, although there is no concrete evidence. Others suggest that Philip's assassination was orchestrated by political rivals or even by disgruntled nobles. With Philip's death, Alexander was thrust onto the throne of Macedonia at just 20 years old. He faced immediate challenges to his rule, including dissent among the Greek city-states and factions within his own court. Yet he acted quickly and decisively, displaying a remarkable level of leadership for someone so young. Alexander's swift response to rebellion and his consolidation of power would mark the beginning of his illustrious, albeit short, reign as one of history's greatest conquerors. In these formative years, Alexander acquired the qualities that would define his legacy: an unyielding sense of purpose, a vision of a unified empire, and an insatiable thirst for knowledge. Influenced by his parents, educated by one of the world's greatest philosophers, and seasoned by early military training, Alexander emerged as a young king prepared not just to rule Macedonia but to change the world. Chapter 2: Ascension to Power. At the age of 20, Alexander ascended to the throne of Macedonia, a kingdom on the brink of greatness yet vulnerable to both internal and external threats. Inheriting his father's legacy was not a simple task. Philip II had not only transformed Macedonia into a powerful military state but also laid the groundwork for uniting Greece under Macedonian rule, with plans to invade the Persian Empire. However, Philip's sudden assassination in 336 BCE left a void that Alexander had to fill quickly and decisively. This chapter explores Alexander's early steps as king, his swift consolidation of power, and his bold moves to maintain control over Greece. We'll see how he quelled rebellions, secured alliances, and finally set his sights on his father's unrealized ambition, the conquest of Persia. The immediate challenges of succession. Alexander's ascension to the throne was not without opposition. Macedonia's leadership transition was fraught with danger, as rival claimants, political factions, and rebellious factions in the Greek city-states all saw Philip's death as an opportunity to assert their own power. Within Macedonia itself, Alexander faced dissent among the noble families, some of whom had grown increasingly wary of the young prince's ambition. The abrupt loss of Philip, a seasoned and charismatic leader, left many skeptical of Alexander's ability to lead. One of Alexander's first moves as king was to eliminate any immediate threats within his own court. He ordered the execution of potential rivals, including several nobles who might challenge his rule. Among them was a cousin who claimed a right to the throne and several military commanders who were rumored to harbor dissent. Though this decision was ruthless, it demonstrated Alexander's commitment to securing his position. His approach sent a clear message to his subjects: Alexander's rule would not be questioned. This period also saw the deepening of Alexander's relationship with his mother, Olympias, who remained a key ally. Olympias wielded significant influence and used her own network of loyalists to support Alexander's consolidation of power. Their partnership was built on mutual respect and ambition, even if it often took on a complex and occasionally strained dynamic. The unification of Greece. Having secured his throne in Macedonia, Alexander turned his attention to Greece, where Philip's death had sparked hope among city-states for independence. Athens, Thebes, and several other city-states viewed the transition of power in Macedonia as an opportunity to break free from Macedonian dominance. Thebes, in particular, had a history of rivalry with Macedonia and had fought Philip's forces in previous battles. When reports reached Alexander of potential revolts, he knew he needed to act swiftly and decisively to demonstrate his strength. In 335 BC, Alexander led a rapid and forceful campaign southward, moving his forces with such speed that many Greek city-states were taken by surprise. His army reached Thebes before the city could fully mobilize. Thebes attempted to resist, but Alexander's military prowess and superior tactics proved overwhelming. In a brutal display of power, he crushed the Theban resistance, sparing only those who had supported Macedonian rule and razing much of the city. This act was a warning to other Greek states that defiance would not be tolerated. The destruction of Thebes had the desired effect. Athens and other city-states quickly reaffirmed their allegiance to Macedonia, avoiding conflict. Alexander's decisive action established his authority over Greece and demonstrated his commitment to his father's legacy of unification. However, his brutality at Thebes also served as a reminder that, while he had inherited Philip's dream of a united Greece, he would pursue it on his own terms. The vision of a new campaign, Persia. With Greece under control, Alexander turned his attention to an even greater prize, Persia. For decades, the Persian Empire had been the dominant power in the ancient world, spanning from the eastern Mediterranean to the edges of India. It was an empire of immense wealth, diversity, and complexity. Conquering Persia was a feat that had been dreamed of by Greek leaders, including Alexander's father, who had planned an invasion before his untimely death. For Alexander, however, the invasion of Persia was more than just the fulfillment of his father's ambition. It was a chance to prove himself on the world stage. Alexander's campaign against Persia was fueled by both personal and political motivations. He wanted to be seen not only as a conqueror but as a liberator of Greek cities under Persian rule and as a new kind of leader who could bridge east and west. To fund this monumental campaign, Alexander consolidated resources from Macedonian treasury and sought additional support from Greek city-states. Recognizing the wealth and influence of Persia, he promised his troops and allies that this campaign would bring unparalleled riches, fame, and glory. Many Greek city-states and their leaders, despite previous rivalries, rallied behind Alexander, enticed by the promise of spoils and the allure of defeating their longtime foe. The assembling of the Macedonian army. Alexander's next step was to organize his military forces, a task that required both strategic acumen and diplomatic skill. The Macedonian army, strengthened by years of reform under Philip, was one of the most advanced of its time. It featured the phalanx, an infantry formation renowned for its effectiveness in battle, and a well-trained cavalry, which Alexander would use to devastating effect. The phalanx, made up of heavily armed infantrymen called pezzeteroi, foot companions, was a signature of Macedonian military power. Each soldier carried a long spear called a sarissa, which could be up to 18 feet in length, allowing the phalanx to maintain distance from enemies while striking with precision. Alexander personally trained his forces, instilling in them not only discipline but also loyalty, creating an army that was as cohesive as it was powerful. In addition to Macedonian troops, Alexander enlisted soldiers from Greek city-states, forging an alliance that symbolized the unity he sought to create. Among his ranks were skilled archers, engineers for siege warfare, and auxiliary troops from Thrace and Illyria. This diversity in his army reflected Alexander's vision for a broader cultural integration, even if the primary objective remained military conquest. Alexander's cavalry, the hetairoi or companion cavalry, was his elite unit and a source of great pride. Led by close friends and trusted generals, the companion cavalry provided Alexander with a mobile and deadly force capable of rapid strikes and strategic maneuvers. It would become one of the most iconic elements of his campaigns, often delivering decisive blows that turned the tide in critical battles. Crossing the Hellespont. The journey begins. In 334 BCE, after securing Greece and amassing his forces, Alexander made his first move against Persia by crossing the Hellespont, modern-day Dardanelles, the narrow strait that separates Europe from Asia. This act was both practical and symbolic. By crossing into Asia, Alexander was marking the beginning of his grand campaign, a gesture that emphasized his commitment to bringing Greek ideals and influence to the East. Upon landing on Asian soil, Alexander made an offering to the gods, paying homage to his divine lineage and reaffirming his belief in his destiny. He also visited the ancient city of Troy, where he honored the legendary heroes of the Trojan War, especially Achilles, his own personal hero. This ceremonial start to the campaign inspired his troops and added a sense of historical and divine significance to their mission. The initial stages of the campaign saw Alexander demonstrating his skill as a leader and tactician. His first encounters with Persian forces tested his strategies, and he quickly adapted to the unfamiliar terrain and tactics of his opponents. The Battle of the Granicus River, his first major engagement with the Persians, set the tone for the rest of his campaign. Despite being outnumbered, Alexander's innovative use of the phalanx and cavalry led to a decisive victory, earning him the respect of his troops and sending a message to Persia that he was a formidable foe. The birth of a legend. By the time Alexander crossed into Asia, he was no longer just the young king of Macedonia. He was transforming into a living legend. His charisma, courage, and willingness to lead from the front inspired both his men and the regions he conquered. Stories of his bravery spread, and many came to see him as a hero in the mold of Achilles or Hercules, a man with divine favor destined to change the world. In the early stages of his Persian campaign, Alexander's actions showed that he was not only a brilliant strategist but also a leader with a vision that extended beyond mere conquest. He respected the customs of the cities he captured, treated defeated enemies with dignity, and often spared those who surrendered willingly. This policy of clemency earned him the loyalty of some of the people he conquered and laid the foundation for the cultural blending that would later characterize his empire. Chapter 3: Crossing into Asia. In 334 BCE, with Greece united under his command and an army loyal to his leadership, Alexander set his sights on Persia. This was not merely a military campaign but the start of a journey that would define his legacy as one of the greatest conquerors of the ancient world. His crossing of the Hellespont, the narrow strait separating Europe and Asia, was a pivotal moment that symbolized his ambition to expand the Greek world and unify diverse cultures under his rule. This chapter covers the initial phase of Alexander's Persian campaign, his first encounters with Persian forces, and the strategic maneuvers that demonstrated his genius as a military leader. We'll delve into his motives, his relationship with his men, and the intricate tactics that led him to his first significant victory on foreign soil. The crossing of the Hellespont, a momentous start. Alexander's crossing of the Hellespont was not a mere logistical maneuver, it was a deliberate and symbolic act. By stepping into Asia, he proclaimed his intention to conquer and reshape the ancient world. The crossing itself was meticulously organized, with troops, horses, and supplies transported across the strait in a carefully coordinated effort. Alexander, ever conscious of the historical and divine implications of his actions, paused at the shores of Asia to perform a series of rituals and sacrifices. In a ceremonial gesture, he cast a spear into the soil, symbolizing his right of conquest over Asia. This act was rooted in Greek custom and belief, reflecting Alexander's conviction that his campaign was not just a conquest but a mission blessed by the gods. His respect for tradition and his confidence in divine favor inspired his men, reinforcing their belief that they were part of something larger than themselves. Once on Asian soil, Alexander took the opportunity to visit the ancient city of Troy, where he paid homage to Achilles, his childhood hero and role model. The legacy of Achilles had always been a powerful influence on Alexander, fueling his desire to achieve greatness. He made offerings at the supposed tomb of Achilles, reinforcing his identity as a warrior destined for eternal glory. For Alexander and his men, the stop at Troy was a reminder of the epic nature of their campaign, a journey that would echo the legendary feats of their ancestors. The Persian Empire, an imposing foe. Before we delve into Alexander's initial victories, it is important to understand the scale and power of his enemy, the Persian Empire. Founded by Cyrus the Great in the 6th century BCE, the Persian Empire had grown to encompass territories from the Aegean Sea to the borders of India. It was a vast and culturally diverse realm ruled by Darius III, a king who inherited a complex and extensive bureaucracy, a formidable military, and vast wealth. Unlike the city-states of Greece, Persia was a centralized empire, capable of mobilizing enormous resources and manpower. The Persian military was diverse, drawing soldiers from across its vast territories, each bringing unique skills and fighting styles. However, while the Persian Empire boasted sheer numbers and wealth, it also faced internal divisions and logistical challenges, as Darius struggled to maintain control over such a sprawling domain. Alexander, aware of these weaknesses, planned to exploit them through rapid, decisive actions and psychological warfare. Alexander's campaign against Persia would be a test of endurance, ingenuity, and strategy. His army, though smaller, was highly trained, disciplined, and equipped with the latest military innovations, particularly the Macedonian phalanx. Alexander was not merely focused on victory. He aimed to dismantle Persian rule and establish himself as the successor to its throne. The Battle of the Granicus River, a bold gamble. The first major confrontation between Alexander's forces and the Persian army occurred at the Granicus River, a fast-flowing river in modern-day Turkey. Persian satraps, regional governors, had amassed an army to confront Alexander, intending to stop him at the very edge of Asia. Their strategy was simple: hold their position on the opposite bank, using the river as a natural barrier to slow Alexander's advance and allow reinforcements to arrive. Alexander, however, was not deterred by the challenge. Viewing the Granicus not as an obstacle but as an opportunity to showcase his might, he decided to launch a bold frontal assault. His strategy defied conventional military wisdom, which would have dictated caution, especially when crossing a river under enemy fire. Yet, Alexander's calculated risk would prove decisive. As his army approached the riverbank, Alexander personally led the initial cavalry charge, plunging into the water and urging his men to follow. This act of bravery inspired his troops and destabilized the Persian defense. Alexander's phalanx units moved with precision, advancing in a tight formation that maintained cohesion despite the difficult terrain. The Macedonian cavalry, led by the elite companion cavalry, struck the Persian lines with devastating force, breaking through their ranks. The Persian forces, unprepared for such a direct assault, struggled to hold their ground. Alexander's infantry soon joined the battle, pushing the Persians back with a relentless advance. In the chaos of combat, Alexander demonstrated his personal courage by engaging in hand-to-hand combat and narrowly escaping death after a Persian noble struck him with an axe, only to be saved by one of his officers. His willingness to fight alongside his men and face danger head-on won him their loyalty and respect. Within hours, the Persian army was routed, and Alexander emerged victorious. The Battle of the Granicus River was a defining moment in Alexander's career. It demonstrated his audacity, tactical skill, and the loyalty of his troops. News of his victory spread quickly, earning him respect and admiration even among his enemies. Diplomacy and integration, securing his foothold in Asia. Following his victory at Granicus, Alexander faced a strategic choice: to pillage and plunder or to build alliances and secure loyalty among the local population. He chose the latter, believing that a policy of clemency and respect would aid his long-term goal of unifying the East and West. Rather than punishing the captured Persian officials and soldiers, Alexander integrated them into his administration, keeping many satraps in their positions and allowing them to govern under his authority. This approach was part of a broader strategy to win the hearts of the conquered peoples. Alexander's goal was not simply to defeat Persia but to create a new empire that blended Greek and Persian traditions. His policy of tolerance encouraged many cities to welcome him as a liberator rather than a conqueror. He honored local customs, respected religious practices, and encouraged his soldiers to engage with the local population. By doing so, he fostered loyalty and minimized resistance, allowing him to maintain control over newly conquered regions with minimal force. The importance of logistics: sustaining the army on foreign soil. A crucial but often overlooked aspect of Alexander's campaign was the logistical support required to sustain an army deep in enemy territory. Alexander understood that a well-fed, well-supplied army was essential to maintaining morale and combat effectiveness. His campaign in Asia required careful planning and coordination to ensure that his troops had access to food, shelter, and medical care, even as they ventured farther from Macedonia. Alexander relied on local resources whenever possible, forging alliances with communities that could provide supplies. He also established supply lines and organized a network of depots where his army could rest and resupply. His attention to detail in logistics allowed him to maintain a rapid pace, outmaneuvering Persian forces and achieving victories that often relied on his ability to surprise his enemies. Building momentum: the march deeper into Asia. With his victory at Granicus, Alexander gained a valuable foothold in Asia Minor. His momentum was building, and his army was growing stronger with each victory. As he marched through the region, he liberated Greek cities that had been under Persian control for decades. Each victory brought new allies, swelling the ranks of his forces and enhancing his reputation as a liberator of Greek culture. In each city, Alexander left behind a small garrison to maintain order, ensuring that his conquests were not fleeting but lasting. He appointed loyal commanders and local leaders who were sympathetic to his cause, establishing a network of alliances that would support his advance deeper into the Persian Empire. His actions demonstrated a blend of military skill, diplomatic acumen, and a visionary sense of leadership. Alexander was not only a conqueror, he was a statesman, a builder, and a strategist who recognized the importance of laying a foundation for the empire he envisioned. As he moved farther into Asia, his reputation as an invincible leader grew, and many cities surrendered without resistance, choosing alliance over destruction. The legacy of the Granicus: a new phase of conquest. The Battle of the Granicus was more than just a military victory. It was the beginning of Alexander's transformation from a Macedonian king into a world leader. His campaign had officially begun, and he had demonstrated to the Persian Empire and the world that he was a force to be reckoned with. The victory cemented his reputation as a brilliant strategist and inspired his troops with a sense of invincibility. With each step deeper into Persian territory, Alexander's vision expanded. No longer content with a quick campaign, he began to see himself as the ruler of a vast, unified empire where Greek and Persian cultures could coexist. His journey was just beginning, and the conquest of Asia would unfold in a series of dramatic encounters that would test his endurance, intelligence, and ambition. With Asia Minor secured and his troops emboldened by their victories, Alexander was ready for his next challenge: Darius III himself. The campaign was about to intensify as Alexander moved toward one of the most significant battles of his life, setting the stage for the legendary confrontations that would define his legacy. Chapter 4: The Battle of Issus. The Battle of Issus, fought in 333 BCE, was one of the most pivotal encounters in Alexander the Great's campaign against Persia. This engagement pitted Alexander's comparatively small but highly disciplined army against the massive forces of Darius III, the Persian king. The stakes were enormous. A victory would cement Alexander's control over Asia Minor and give him a psychological advantage over Darius, while a loss could potentially end his ambitions altogether. The events leading up to Issus and the tactics used during the battle reveal much about Alexander's strategic genius, his courage, and his ability to inspire his men against seemingly insurmountable odds. In this chapter, we'll delve into the build-up to the Battle of Issus, examine the battle's tactical elements, and explore the aftermath, which would forever alter the balance of power in the ancient world. The strategic importance of Issus. Following his decisive victory at the Granicus River, Alexander pushed south along the Mediterranean coast, systematically capturing Persian-held cities in Asia Minor. His campaign strategy was clear: secure control over the region to protect his rear flank and secure supply lines before advancing deeper into the Persian Empire. His victories had not gone unnoticed, and by the time he reached the region of Issus, Darius III recognized the need to confront Alexander personally to prevent further losses and restore Persian dominance. Issus was strategically located near the Cilician Gates, a narrow mountain pass that linked Asia Minor to Syria. Control of Issus was critical for both sides. For Alexander, victory would grant him an unhindered path southward toward the heart of Persia. For Darius, Issus represented the last barrier preventing Alexander from invading the core territories of his empire. Darius assembled a massive army, far larger than Alexander's, and sought to leverage his numbers to crush the Macedonian forces once and for all. Alexander's army, preparation and positioning. Despite the disparity in size between his forces and Darius's, Alexander was confident in his army's discipline, training, and cohesion. His troops were battle-hardened from the campaign's grueling pace and recent victories, and they had developed an unshakable loyalty to Alexander, who consistently led from the front and shared in their hardships. By the time they reached Issus, Alexander's men were experienced in fighting the Persian military and were well-versed in his tactics. Alexander's army consisted of his renowned phalanx infantry, armed with the long sarissa spears that allowed them to strike from a distance, and his elite hetairoi or companion cavalry, led by Alexander himself. Supporting these units were archers, javelin throwers, and light infantry who could respond quickly to shifting battlefield conditions. Each soldier knew his role within the army, and Alexander's strategies were built on precision and cohesion, which would prove crucial against the Persian forces' overwhelming numbers. Upon reaching Issus, Alexander took up a defensive position, stationing his army along the Panaris River. The narrow plain limited the space available to Darius's forces, neutralizing much of the Persian numerical advantage. By choosing a battleground that constrained the Persian army, Alexander effectively leveled the playing field, allowing his smaller but highly organized force to engage with the vast Persian ranks more manageably. The battle begins: Persian overconfidence and Alexander's tactical mastery. When Darius arrived with his army, he likely expected an easy victory. The size of his forces was immense, with tens of thousands of soldiers from across the Persian Empire, archers, cavalry, infantry, and charioteers armed with scythed wheels intended to break through enemy lines. Confident in his overwhelming numbers, Darius placed himself at the center of his line, in the tradition of Persian kings, expecting that his mere presence would bolster his troops and intimidate the Macedonians. However, Darius had underestimated both Alexander's tactical prowess and his soldiers' loyalty and experience. Recognizing Darius's position at the center, Alexander formulated a strategy to exploit this predictable deployment. He aimed to pierce through the Persian left flank with a rapid cavalry assault, then roll back through the enemy lines, destabilizing Darius's center and causing chaos among his forces. As the battle commenced, Alexander ordered his phalanx to hold the line along the river, using their long spears to resist the Persian infantry's advance. Meanwhile, he personally led the Hittairoi in a thunderous charge against the Persian left flank. The Macedonian cavalry, honed to perfection in previous battles, struck with speed and precision, shattering the Persian soldiers' resolve and driving them into retreat. Alexander's attack on the flank had a ripple effect, weakening the entire Persian formation and creating openings that his infantry could exploit. Darius's retreat, the turning point. Realizing that his left flank was collapsing, Darius made a fateful decision. He abandoned his position at the center of the battlefield and fled, leaving his army in disarray. For a Persian king, retreat was almost unheard of, as it signified defeat and dishonor. Darius's flight had a devastating effect on his troops. Seeing their king abandon the fight, the Persian soldiers lost their resolve, and many began to flee as well, leaving behind equipment and supplies in a frantic escape. Alexander, seizing the opportunity, ordered his troops to press the advantage. His men pursued the retreating Persians, capturing high-ranking officers and seizing vast quantities of treasure and military supplies. The victory was overwhelming. Alexander had defeated an army many times the size of his own, capturing both resources and symbolic value that further bolstered his campaign. The aftermath, the impact on Persia and Alexander's growing legend. The Battle of Issus marked a significant turning point in Alexander's campaign and in the larger Greco-Persian conflict. With Darius in retreat, Alexander now had a psychological and strategic advantage over the Persian Empire. The defeat at Issus shattered the myth of Persian invincibility and demonstrated that the Macedonian king was not only a skilled tactician but also a formidable leader capable of challenging the mightiest empire of his time. The battle also cemented Alexander's reputation as a leader favored by the gods, fueling his belief in his divine mission to unite the known world. His troops, already fiercely loyal, saw Issus as proof that their king was destined for greatness, and their commitment to him only deepened. Issus had shown them that, under Alexander's command, they could overcome any challenge, regardless of the odds. In the aftermath of the battle, Alexander found another unexpected prize: the family of Darius III. Among the captured were Darius's wife, mother, and children, whom Alexander treated with respect and dignity, allowing them to maintain their royal status in captivity. This act of clemency earned him admiration, even among his enemies, and contrasted sharply with the image of the ruthless conqueror. By sparing Darius's family, Alexander sought to demonstrate both his power and his sense of honor, positioning himself as a more compassionate leader than the Persian king. Strategic gains: control of Asia Minor and access to Persian wealth. Beyond its symbolic importance, the victory at Issus had immediate and tangible benefits. Alexander now controlled all of Asia Minor, giving him access to crucial resources, including food, materials, and money to fund the next phases of his campaign. Issus opened the door to further advances along the Mediterranean coast, where Persian garrisons in cities like Tyre and Gaza would become Alexander's next targets. The wealth and supplies captured from the Persian camp were substantial, bolstering Alexander's finances and enabling him to pay his troops generously. The morale boost from the victory, combined with the material gains, strengthened his army and allowed him to attract additional recruits. Alexander's forces, now well-provisioned and well-paid, became even more formidable, and the Macedonian king began to take on an almost mythic status, as stories of his victories spread across the ancient world. Issus and Alexander's vision of empire. The Battle of Issus was more than just a military victory. It was a significant step toward Alexander's vision of empire. By defeating Darius and gaining control of Asia Minor, Alexander could now focus on expanding his influence across the eastern Mediterranean. His goal was not simply to conquer lands but to establish a new world order, where Greek and Persian cultures could merge under his leadership. Issus had demonstrated that this vision was within reach, and Alexander's determination to create a lasting legacy became stronger than ever. Issus also served as a crucible in which Alexander's leadership style was tested and refined. He showed that he could inspire his men through courage, that he was capable of mercy even amid conflict, and that his strategic vision extended beyond immediate gains. The victory marked the beginning of Alexander's transformation from a brilliant general to a statesman and visionary leader, one who aspired to reshape the world. The Battle of Issus proved Alexander's military genius and solidified his reputation as an unstoppable force. It showed both his resilience in the face of overwhelming odds and his ability to inspire those around him. With Darius in retreat and Asia Minor firmly under his control, Alexander prepared for the next phase of his campaign. His attention turned toward the fabled city of Tyre and the lands of Egypt, where he would further establish his legacy as the conqueror who redefined the ancient world. Chapter 5: Conquest of Egypt and the Founding of Alexandria. After his resounding victory at the Battle of Issus and the securing of Asia Minor, Alexander turned his gaze southward, toward the rich and strategically critical lands of Egypt. Egypt was a vital part of the Persian Empire, valued not only for its fertile lands and abundant resources but also for its position along critical trade routes connecting the Mediterranean to the Near East and beyond. Conquering Egypt would not only weaken Persia but also strengthen Alexander's control over the eastern Mediterranean and grant him access to immense wealth. This chapter explores Alexander's journey through Egypt, his interactions with Egyptian culture, and the founding of Alexandria, a city that would become a beacon of learning and culture, immortalizing his name for centuries to come. The path to Egypt: Siege of Tyre and Gaza. Before reaching Egypt, Alexander faced a formidable challenge in the Phoenician city of Tyre. Tyre was a wealthy, fortified island city with strong defenses and a powerful navy, and it was a key ally to Persia. Knowing that the Persians could use Tyre as a naval base to threaten his rear, Alexander decided to capture it, despite the city's impregnable appearance. The Siege of Tyre was one of the most challenging operations of Alexander's career, lasting 7 months. The city was located on an island half a mile from the coast, and the Tyrians believed themselves safe from land-based attacks. Alexander, however, was determined to conquer Tyre. He ordered his engineers to construct a massive causeway, or mole, from the mainland to the island, allowing his troops to approach the walls directly. The construction was slow and dangerous, with Tyrian forces launching constant attacks from the sea, but Alexander's persistence and ingenuity paid off. Once the causeway was completed, Alexander's army launched a full assault. With the support of siege towers and battering rams, his troops breached the walls, and after fierce fighting, Tyre fell. The capture of Tyre was a testament to Alexander's resolve and his ability to overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles. Following Tyre, Alexander swiftly moved to Gaza, another strategic location. Gaza, too, resisted fiercely, but Alexander's army quickly overwhelmed it, securing his path to Egypt. With Tyre and Gaza subdued, Alexander could now turn his attention to Egypt. The conquest of these cities demonstrated his willingness to wage extended sieges and his adaptability in the face of complex challenges, qualities that would serve him well in Egypt. Arrival in Egypt: a conqueror welcomed as a liberator. In late 332 BCE, Alexander and his forces entered Egypt, where they encountered minimal resistance. Egypt, under Persian rule for nearly 2 centuries, had become restless and discontented, and Alexander's arrival was seen as an opportunity for liberation rather than further subjugation. The Egyptians welcomed Alexander as a liberator, eager to escape Persian dominance and reclaim their cultural heritage. Recognizing the value of their support, Alexander treated the Egyptians and their traditions with respect, adapting his policies to align with local customs. Unlike other conquerors, Alexander did not impose Greek culture upon the Egyptians. Instead, he embraced and respected Egyptian customs and beliefs. He restored the local religious practices and supported the Egyptian priesthood, winning the loyalty of the people. This approach allowed Alexander to govern Egypt with minimal resistance and positioned him as a unifying leader who valued and preserved the cultural diversity of his empire. Journey to the Oracle of Siwa, claiming divine favor. One of the most intriguing episodes of Alexander's time in Egypt was his journey to the Oracle of Ammon at Siwa, located deep in the western desert. According to ancient tradition, the Oracle of Ammon was a source of divine wisdom, and Alexander believed that consulting the oracle would confirm his status as a leader favored by the gods. This pilgrimage was not just a quest for spiritual insight. It was a symbolic act that bolstered Alexander's image as a divinely sanctioned ruler. The journey to Siwa was grueling, as Alexander and his entourage crossed vast stretches of desert with limited supplies. According to legend, they were guided by miraculous signs, such as sudden rainstorms and mysterious birds that led them to the oasis. When they finally arrived, the priests at Siwa welcomed Alexander and reportedly declared him the son of Ammon, the Egyptian equivalent of Zeus. Alexander's consultation with the oracle is shrouded in mystery, but he left Siwa with a renewed sense of purpose, viewing himself as not just a king but as a semi-divine figure with a mission to unify the world. This experience profoundly influenced Alexander's self-image and his vision for his empire. By aligning himself with the Egyptian god Ammon, Alexander reinforced his appeal to the Egyptians and laid the foundations for his later adoption of Persian and Eastern customs. His journey to Siwa was both a spiritual and political act, strengthening his legitimacy in the eyes of his diverse subjects and setting the stage for the fusion of cultures that would characterize his rule. The founding of Alexandria, vision for a cultural hub. One of Alexander's most lasting contributions to Egypt and to history was the founding of the city of Alexandria. While in Egypt, Alexander identified a strategic location along the Mediterranean coast where he envisioned a new city that would serve as a center of Greek culture, trade, and learning. He chose the site carefully, selecting a location near the Nile Delta with access to both the Mediterranean and the rich agricultural lands of Egypt. In 331 BC, Alexander laid the foundation of Alexandria, personally overseeing the city's design and development. According to legend, he marked out the city's boundaries himself, using barley to trace the layout of its streets and structures. He consulted architects and planners, envisioning a metropolis that would blend Greek and Egyptian influences and serve as a symbol of the new world order he sought to create. Alexandria would become a center of commerce, knowledge, and cultural exchange, attracting scholars, traders, and artists from across the ancient world. Over time, Alexandria grew to embody Alexander's vision, becoming one of the greatest cities of the ancient world. It housed the famous Library of Alexandria, a monumental repository of knowledge, and the Lighthouse of Alexandria, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. The city became a beacon of Hellenistic culture, where Greek, Egyptian, Persian, and other traditions coexisted and flourished. Although Alexander would not live to see its full glory, Alexandria immortalized his legacy as a founder of civilizations, bridging East and West. Egyptian integration, governing with respect and diplomacy. Alexander's time in Egypt exemplified his strategy of integration and respect for local cultures. Unlike previous conquerors who had imposed foreign rule upon Egypt, Alexander adopted Egyptian customs and practices, incorporating local leaders into his administration. He appointed Egyptian governors to oversee the day-to-day affairs of the region, while maintaining a Macedonian military presence to secure his control. To further strengthen his relationship with the Egyptians, Alexander endorsed Egyptian religious practices, including the worship of the gods and the pharaoh cult. He even took on the traditional title of pharaoh, a gesture that underscored his respect for Egyptian heritage and solidified his legitimacy as their ruler. By embracing Egyptian identity, Alexander avoided the resentment that often accompanies foreign rule, fostering a stable and prosperous relationship that would benefit his empire. This approach to governance set a precedent for Alexander's later conquests in Persia and beyond. Rather than imposing a single cultural identity on his empire, he sought to create a mosaic of traditions that respected the unique customs of each region. His time in Egypt demonstrated that his vision extended beyond mere conquest. He was committed to building an empire united by mutual respect and shared prosperity. Departure from Egypt, the path forward. By the end of his time in Egypt, Alexander had solidified his control over one of the wealthiest and most culturally significant regions of the ancient world. Egypt would provide him with resources, wealth, and strategic positioning that would support his further campaigns. His relationship with the Egyptians was secure, and his vision of a unified empire that respected and celebrated cultural diversity was well underway. As he prepared to leave Egypt, Alexander's focus shifted once again to the Persian heartland. His ultimate goal was to confront Darius III and establish himself as the supreme ruler of Persia. The successes in Egypt and the founding of Alexandria had strengthened Alexander's resolve and expanded his vision of what his empire could be. He was no longer just a king seeking glory through conquest. He was a leader striving to create a legacy that would transcend his lifetime. Legacy of Alexandria, a city that endures. The foundation of Alexandria remains one of Alexander's most enduring achievements. Over centuries, the city would grow into a thriving metropolis, renowned for its intellectual and cultural contributions. The Library of Alexandria became a center for scholarship, attracting thinkers from across the ancient world, and the city itself embodied the blending of Greek, Egyptian, and other cultural influences that Alexander had envisioned. For Alexander, Alexandria was not merely a city, it was a symbol of his ideals. It represented the fusion of different cultures, the pursuit of knowledge, and the legacy of a ruler who saw himself not just as a conqueror but as a builder of civilizations. Through Alexandria, Alexander's vision of unity and cultural exchange continued long after his death, impacting generations to come. With Egypt firmly within his grasp and a strong base established in Alexandria, Alexander was prepared to face his next great challenge. His sights turned eastward, toward the core of the Persian Empire, where he would encounter Darius III once again in the decisive Battle of Gaugamela, a confrontation that would bring him to the threshold of achieving his greatest ambition. Chapter 6: The Siege of Tyre and the Battle of Gaugamela. After his successful campaign in Egypt and the founding of Alexandria, Alexander the Great was ready to face the might of the Persian Empire once again. His sights were set on a final, decisive confrontation with Darius III. However, securing a path to the heart of Persia required overcoming key strategic locations, particularly the well-fortified city of Tyre and, later, a decisive victory at Gaugamela. Each of these challenges would test Alexander's resolve, tactical skill, and leadership, solidifying his reputation as one of history's most brilliant military strategists. In this chapter, we delve into Alexander's meticulous approach to the siege of Tyre, his strategic brilliance at the Battle of Gaugamela, and the impact these victories had on his campaign to reshape the ancient world. The siege of Tyre, overcoming an impregnable fortress. Following his campaign in Egypt, Alexander understood that securing control over the eastern Mediterranean was critical for protecting his supply lines and ensuring safe passage for his troops as they advanced deeper into Persian territory. Tyre, a powerful and wealthy Phoenician city-state located on an island half a mile from the coast, represented the last major obstacle along this route. It was well known for its formidable defenses, and its citizens had long believed their city to be impenetrable. When Alexander approached Tyre in early 332 BC, he requested permission to enter the city and make sacrifices to the god Melkart, a deity worshipped both by the Tyrians and by Alexander, who saw him as equivalent to Heracles, Hercules. The Tyrians, suspicious of Alexander's intentions, denied his request and prepared for a siege. Recognizing Tyre's strategic importance, Alexander could not afford to bypass the city and risk a Persian resurgence along his supply lines. He decided to conquer Tyre, regardless of the difficulties it presented. Alexander's plan to capture Tyre was audacious and ambitious. Lacking a sufficient navy to besiege an island city, he ordered his engineers to construct a massive causeway, or mole, stretching from the mainland to the island. This would allow his soldiers and siege engines to approach Tyre's walls directly. The construction was an arduous task, as Tyrian defenders launched relentless attacks on the workers, using ships to strike at the causeway and hurling projectiles from the city walls. Alexander responded by fortifying the mole with protective structures and deploying his own siege engines to counter the Tyrians' assault. Despite the Tyrians' fierce resistance and attempts to destroy the causeway, Alexander's determination was unwavering. After several months of grueling work, the mole was completed, and Alexander's army launched a full assault on Tyre's walls. Using siege towers and battering rams, his troops managed to breach the defenses, leading to a brutal and bloody confrontation within the city. The fall of Tyre marked a significant victory for Alexander, proving that no obstacle was too great for his ambition. The siege of Tyre became legendary, not only for the scale of Alexander's engineering feats but also for the sheer resolve he displayed in overcoming a seemingly impregnable fortress. Tyre's fall sent a clear message to the rest of the Persian Empire. Alexander was an unstoppable force, willing to go to any lengths to achieve his goals. The march eastward, preparing for the final confrontation. With Tyre subdued, Alexander continued his march eastward, securing his supply lines along the Mediterranean and leaving behind a series of garrisons to protect the region. By now, word of his victories had spread across the ancient world, and he became known not only as a conqueror but as a liberator, especially among cities that had long resented Persian rule. His reputation inspired loyalty, and he garnered support from various regions, swelling his ranks and providing additional resources for his campaign. Alexander's path toward Persia's heartland led him to yet another formidable target, the city of Gaza. Like Tyre, Gaza resisted fiercely, but after a determined siege, Alexander's forces overcame the city's defenses. With the conquest of Gaza, Alexander secured his control over the eastern Mediterranean, paving the way for an unimpeded advance into Mesopotamia, the core territory of the Persian Empire. As he moved eastward, Alexander faced the daunting challenge of confronting Darius III and his vast Persian forces in open battle. Darius, humiliated by his previous defeat at Issus, was determined to restore Persian dominance and assembled one of the largest armies in history to meet Alexander in what would become known as the Battle of Gaugamela. The Persian preparations at Gaugamela. Darius III, fully aware of the threat Alexander posed to his empire, gathered an immense army drawn from every corner of Persia. His forces included infantry, cavalry, archers, and war chariots equipped with scythes designed to mow down enemy ranks. Darius chose the plains of Gaugamela, near modern-day Erbil in Iraq, as the battlefield. The open terrain provided ample space for his larger numbers to maneuver, and he believed it would give him a decisive advantage over Alexander's smaller army. To prepare the battlefield, Darius ordered his engineers to flatten the terrain, creating a smooth surface for his chariots to maximize their impact. Confident in his numerical superiority, Darius positioned himself at the center of his forces, surrounded by his elite bodyguard and Persian nobles. His confidence was bolstered by his massive army, which outnumbered Alexander's forces by a wide margin. Darius believed that Alexander's luck had run out and that the overwhelming Persian numbers would crush the Macedonian army. Alexander's strategic genius at Gaugamela. As Alexander's army approached Gaugamela, he took stock of the Persian forces and realized the magnitude of the challenge before him. He knew that a direct engagement would be disastrous, given the sheer size of Darius's army and the terrain that favored Persian chariots. Instead, Alexander devised a plan that would exploit the flexibility and discipline of his forces, focusing on creating openings in the Persian lines that he could exploit with speed and precision. On the day of the battle, Alexander arranged his army in a unique formation, with his phalanx positioned at the center and his companion cavalry on the right flank, which he personally commanded. He placed additional troops on the left flank and positioned light infantry at the rear to counter the threat of Persian chariots. Alexander's strategy involved drawing the Persian forces outward, creating gaps in their formation that he could then penetrate. As the battle commenced, Alexander ordered his right flank to advance at an oblique angle, slowly drawing the Persian left wing away from their center. Darius, seeing an opportunity to strike Alexander's flanking force, ordered his left wing to engage fully. This maneuver, however, played directly into Alexander's plan, as the gap created in the Persian lines allowed Alexander to launch a concentrated cavalry charge directly at Darius's position. In a brilliant tactical move, Alexander led his companion cavalry in a sudden and decisive attack through the opening, driving toward Darius himself. The sight of Alexander's cavalry bearing down upon him caused panic among the Persian ranks, and Darius, fearing capture or death, chose to flee the battlefield. As their king abandoned them, the Persian troops lost their morale and began to scatter. Aftermath: the fall of the Persian Empire. The Battle of Gaugamela was a defining moment in Alexander's campaign. With Darius in retreat and his army in disarray, Alexander emerged victorious, effectively sealing his conquest of Persia. The defeat at Gaugamela shattered the Persian Empire's ability to resist, and Alexander's path to the heart of Persia was now unobstructed. In the aftermath of Gaugamela, Alexander pursued Darius, who fled deeper into Persia, hoping to regroup. However, Darius was eventually betrayed by his own nobles and assassinated, ending the Achaemenid dynasty and leaving Alexander as the undisputed ruler of the former Persian Empire. This victory marked the beginning of a new era, as Alexander adopted Persian customs, married into the Persian aristocracy, and sought to integrate Greek and Persian cultures. The fusion of cultures, Alexander's new vision. With Persia under his control, Alexander's ambitions expanded. He was no longer simply a Greek king or a Macedonian conqueror. He saw himself as the ruler of a unified, multicultural empire. To achieve this vision, Alexander encouraged marriages between his officers and Persian women, promoted Persian customs alongside Greek practices, and adopted elements of Persian royal attire and ceremony. Alexander's policies aimed to bridge the cultural divide between his Greek and Persian subjects. He introduced the practice of proskynesis, a Persian custom of bowing or prostration before the king, among his court, though this was met with resistance from his Macedonian companions, who viewed it as incompatible with Greek values. Despite the challenges, Alexander remained committed to his vision of a blended empire, even if it meant facing dissent from those closest to him. The Battle of Gaugamela and the subsequent integration of Persian customs marked the start of what would later be known as the Hellenistic Age. This era saw the spread of Greek culture across the East and the incorporation of Eastern traditions into the Greek world. Alexander's empire would become a melting pot of ideas, languages, and traditions, creating a legacy that would endure long after his death. Legacy of Gaugamela, Alexander's unyielding ambition. The victory at Gaugamela stands as one of Alexander's greatest military achievements, showcasing his brilliance in strategy, his ability to inspire loyalty among his men, and his relentless pursuit of his vision. This battle was more than a military triumph. It marked the beginning of Alexander's transformation from a conqueror of nations to a builder of civilizations. His ambition was no longer limited to conquest. He envisioned a new world order where East and West could coexist and thrive under his rule. With the Persian Empire defeated and a new vision for his empire taking shape, Alexander's journey was far from over. His sights turned even farther eastward, toward the unknown lands of Central Asia and beyond, where he would face new challenges and test the limits of his empire. Chapter 7: The March Eastward and the Founding of New Cities. With the Persian Empire under his control, Alexander was no longer bound by the ambitions of his predecessors. Instead, he sought to expand his empire beyond the known boundaries of the ancient world, marching eastward into the uncharted territories of Central Asia. This journey was not only a military campaign but also an opportunity for Alexander to spread Greek culture and establish a network of cities that would serve as lasting symbols of his rule and vision. In this chapter, we follow Alexander's march through Central Asia, his founding of new cities, and the difficulties he faced as he pushed his army deeper into foreign lands. We'll explore how his vision evolved, the resilience of his soldiers, and the complex interactions between the Greeks and the diverse cultures they encountered along the way. The drive eastward, a new phase of conquest. After his victory at Gaugamela and the subsequent death of Darius III, Alexander was in command of the vast expanse of the former Persian Empire, stretching from Egypt to the western borders of India. Yet, despite the enormity of his achievement, Alexander was not content to stop. The Persian Empire, though rich in history and resources, represented only a part of Alexander's growing ambition. His gaze turned eastward, toward the lands of Central Asia and India, regions rich in both mystery and wealth. The decision to continue the campaign into Central Asia reflected Alexander's relentless ambition and his belief in a destiny that demanded constant expansion. Many of his generals and soldiers, however, were beginning to show signs of weariness. They had marched thousands of miles, endured intense battles, and were now being asked to enter regions that were less familiar and more dangerous. Yet, Alexander's charisma and determination inspired loyalty, and his men followed him as he led them into the wilds of Central Asia. The founding of new cities, spreading Hellenistic culture. As Alexander advanced through Central Asia, he established numerous cities that would later serve as administrative and military hubs, helping to secure his new territories. Each city became a center for Greek culture and governance, populated with settlers from Alexander's army and civilians from across the empire. These cities, often named Alexandriat in honor of their founder, became symbols of his vision for a unified empire where Greek and local cultures could merge. Among the most famous of these cities was Alexandria Eskate, or Alexandria the Furthest, located in what is now Tajikistan. This city represented the easternmost point of Alexander's empire and served as a gateway between Greek and Central Asian cultures. Founded in 329 BCE, Alexandria Eskate became a vibrant cultural and trade center, facilitating exchanges between Greek settlers and the local Sogdian population. Each city was designed with Greek architectural features, such as theaters, temples, and marketplaces, blending Hellenistic and local influences. By establishing these urban centers, Alexander hoped to create a lasting legacy that would outlive his military conquests. These cities served as hubs for Greek language, art, and philosophy, fostering a blend of cultures that would define the Hellenistic age. Over time, these cities developed into thriving communities where Greek settlers, Persian nobles, and local elites lived side by side, creating a unique cultural fusion that became one of Alexander's most enduring legacies. The Sogdian Campaign: Resilience against Resistance. As Alexander moved deeper into Central Asia, he encountered fierce resistance from the local populations, particularly in the region of Sogdia, which includes modern-day Uzbekistan and Tajikistan. The Sogdians, led by a local noble named Spitamines, launched a series of guerrilla attacks against Alexander's forces, using their knowledge of the mountainous terrain to their advantage. Unlike previous Persian forces, the Sogdians did not engage Alexander in direct battle but instead adopted hit-and-run tactics that frustrated his troops and stretched his supply lines. The Sogdian campaign proved to be one of the most grueling parts of Alexander's journey. His army faced not only military resistance but also the harsh realities of the Central Asian environment, from extreme temperatures to rugged landscapes that made travel and resupply difficult. Despite these challenges, Alexander was determined to subdue the region. He divided his forces to cover more territory, launching simultaneous campaigns to hunt down resistance fighters and secure key strongholds. One of the most notable moments of the Sogdian campaign was Alexander's capture of the Sogdian Rock, a mountain fortress considered impregnable by the locals. When Alexander demanded their surrender, the defenders mocked him, saying that only men with wings could reach them. In response, Alexander ordered a group of his most skilled climbers to scale the cliffs under cover of night. The sight of Macedonian soldiers atop the fortress the following morning stunned the defenders, who surrendered in awe of Alexander's resolve and tactical ingenuity. The campaign in Sogdia tested Alexander's patience and resilience, but it also demonstrated his adaptability and willingness to employ unconventional tactics. By conquering this difficult region, he solidified his control over Central Asia and broke the power of the Sogdian resistance, allowing him to continue his march eastward. Marriages and diplomacy, integrating cultures. During his campaign in Central Asia, Alexander increasingly embraced the idea of cultural integration. He began encouraging his soldiers to marry local women, fostering a blending of Greek and Persian traditions that aligned with his vision of a united empire. Alexander himself married Roxana, a Sogdian noblewoman, in a union that symbolized his commitment to cultural unity. Their marriage was both a personal and political act, aimed at securing his influence in Sogdia and demonstrating respect for local traditions. Alexander's policy of integration extended beyond marriage. He encouraged the adoption of Persian dress and customs within his court, and he appointed Persians and other local elites to positions of power within his administration. These actions were controversial among his Macedonian officers, many of whom saw them as a betrayal of Greek values. However, Alexander believed that the success of his empire depended on a genuine fusion of cultures, where Greek and local customs could coexist and strengthen one another. These diplomatic and cultural efforts marked a significant shift in Alexander's approach to empire building. He was no longer merely a conqueror. He aspired to be a ruler who could bridge cultural divides and create a harmonious and enduring legacy. His actions in Central Asia reflected a broader vision of empire that transcended Greek or Persian identity, paving the way for a multicultural society that would define the Hellenistic world. The approach to India: encounters with new cultures. Having secured Central Asia, Alexander set his sights on India, a land of immense wealth and mystique that lay beyond the known boundaries of the Greek world. India was rumored to be filled with exotic riches and powerful kings, and Alexander was drawn to the challenge of conquering this new frontier. However, the journey toward India brought new challenges, as his army began to show signs of exhaustion and dissent. Alexander's encounters with Indian culture and customs further fueled his fascination with the diversity of his empire. As he approached the Indian subcontinent, he encountered peoples and practices vastly different from those of Persia or Greece. Intrigued by these differences, Alexander sought to learn more about Indian religion, philosophy, and warfare, seeing India not only as a land to conquer but as a source of new ideas and knowledge that could enrich his empire. At the same time, the march toward India tested the loyalty of his troops. Many of his soldiers, weary from years of continuous campaigning, began to question the necessity of further expansion. They had journeyed thousands of miles from their homeland, endured harsh conditions, and fought countless battles. The prospect of venturing into yet another unknown land filled some with dread, while others saw it as a final test of their loyalty to their leader. The founding of new cities along the route. As he advanced toward India, Alexander continued his policy of founding cities along the way, creating outposts that served both military and cultural functions. These cities, like those he established in Central Asia, became vital centers of Greek influence and administration. They provided his army with secure bases, helped consolidate his hold over newly conquered territories, and encouraged the spread of Greek culture and language. Each city was a testament to Alexander's commitment to creating a network of urban centers that would facilitate communication and trade across his vast empire. By establishing these cities, he hoped to leave behind a lasting infrastructure that would endure long after his campaign ended. These cities not only served as military strongholds but also as symbols of Hellenistic influence, where Greek, Persian, and local traditions merged into a unique cultural blend. The legacy of the Eastern Campaign. The march eastward marked a transformative period in Alexander's life and career. His encounters with diverse cultures, his marriage to Roxana, and his establishment of new cities reflected an evolving vision for his empire, one where integration and cultural exchange were just as important as military conquest. His actions laid the groundwork for the Hellenistic Age, a period characterized by the fusion of Greek and Eastern cultures, advancements in science, art, and philosophy, and the spread of Greek influence across Asia. Alexander's Eastern campaign also highlighted the challenges of maintaining an empire that spanned diverse cultures and landscapes. His vision of a multicultural empire was bold and unprecedented, but it was also fraught with tensions, both within his ranks and among the conquered populations. The further he ventured from Macedonia, the more difficult it became to balance the demands of his troops with his aspirations for unity. As he prepared to cross into India, Alexander faced the dual challenge of fulfilling his ambition while managing the growing strain within his army. His relentless pursuit of expansion had brought him to the edge of the known world, and the journey into India would test the limits of both his empire and his leadership. Chapter 8. The Indian Campaign and the Battle of the Hydaspes. As Alexander pushed beyond the limits of the known world, he reached the fabled land of India in 327 BC. For both Alexander and his troops, India represented a new frontier, an exotic and mysterious land, rumored to be filled with wealth, powerful kings, and formidable warriors. Driven by his boundless ambition and a desire to test his limits, Alexander began his Indian campaign, confronting new challenges in the form of monsoons, dense jungles, and fierce opponents. This phase of his conquest would culminate in the Battle of the Hydaspes, one of the most challenging and memorable battles of his career, where he would face King Porus, a ruler whose bravery and resilience would earn Alexander's respect. In this chapter, we follow Alexander as he embarks on his journey through India, examining his encounters with Indian culture, his difficult campaign through unfamiliar terrain, and the historic confrontation at the Hydaspes River. The journey into India, new challenges and tensions. Alexander's journey into India was marked by a series of unexpected challenges. The terrain was unlike anything his army had encountered before, with dense jungles, sweltering heat, and heavy monsoon rains that slowed their progress and tested their endurance. The soldiers, already exhausted from years of continuous campaigning, found the Indian climate particularly punishing. The unfamiliar environment took a toll on both their morale and their physical well-being. Moreover, as Alexander's campaign moved deeper into the Indian subcontinent, tensions within his ranks began to escalate. Many of his men, weary from years of warfare, questioned the necessity of further expansion. They had marched thousands of miles from home, facing perilous battles, difficult terrain, and countless hardships. Alexander's relentless drive to push forward strained his relationship with his soldiers, who began to wonder if his ambition had become reckless. Despite these difficulties, Alexander's charisma and determination continued to inspire loyalty among his core supporters. His vision of a united, multicultural empire, combined with his own willingness to endure the same hardships as his men, kept morale from collapsing entirely. Nevertheless, the signs of dissent were becoming increasingly apparent, setting the stage for future challenges to his authority. Encounters with Indian culture and philosophy. As Alexander advanced through the regions of the Indian subcontinent, he encountered new cultural practices, philosophies, and religious beliefs that intrigued and fascinated him. India's spiritual traditions were unlike anything he had seen in Greece or Persia, and he took a keen interest in learning about them. One of the most significant encounters he had was with Indian ascetics, who practiced forms of meditation and self-discipline that piqued Alexander's intellectual curiosity. Alexander's interest in Indian philosophy reflected his lifelong commitment to learning and his desire to incorporate diverse ideas into his empire. He held discussions with local philosophers and priests, showing a genuine respect for their knowledge and way of life. This openness to different cultures and perspectives was a hallmark of his leadership, and it furthered his reputation as a ruler who valued not only military conquest but also cultural enrichment. At the same time, Alexander's fascination with Indian culture presented an opportunity for diplomatic connections. He established alliances with local rulers, who provided him with resources and guides to navigate the challenging terrain. These alliances were crucial for Alexander's campaign, as they allowed him to gain knowledge of the region and maintain his supply lines, easing the burdens of his journey through India. The approach to the Hydaspes River, preparing for battle. As Alexander advanced, he learned of a powerful local ruler, King Porus, who governed the territory along the Hydaspes River, modern-day Jhelum River in Pakistan. Porus was known for his strength, courage, and command over a well-trained army, which included war elephants, a formidable force unfamiliar to Alexander's troops. Recognizing the strategic importance of the Hydaspes, Alexander decided to confront Porus, determined to secure his position in northern India. The Hydaspes River was swollen with monsoon rains, creating a natural barrier that Porus believed would deter Alexander from crossing. Confident in his defensive position, Porus stationed his forces on the far bank, preparing to repel any attempt by the Macedonians to cross the river. However, Alexander's tactical genius allowed him to turn this obstacle into an opportunity. In a move that demonstrated his adaptability and mastery of strategy, Alexander devised a plan to cross the river under the cover of night. He divided his forces, leaving a portion of his army at the primary crossing to distract Porus, while he led a select group of soldiers to a hidden crossing point further upstream. Using stealth and speed, Alexander's troops crossed the river undetected, gaining a strategic advantage by positioning themselves on Porus's flank. The Battle of the Hydaspes, Courage and Strategy. The Battle of the Hydaspes began at dawn, with Alexander's forces advancing from the flank and catching Porus off guard. The Macedonian phalanx and cavalry, bolstered by their surprise positioning, launched a fierce assault. Porus responded by mobilizing his war elephants, which charged at Alexander's infantry with terrifying force. The elephants trampled the Macedonian ranks, causing initial chaos and fear among Alexander's soldiers, who had never encountered such creatures in battle. Yet Alexander quickly adapted his tactics, ordering his troops to target the elephants' handlers and isolate the animals. His light infantry used javelins to harry the elephants, while his archers rained arrows on Porus's forces from a distance. Alexander's cavalry, led by the Hetairoi, companion cavalry, maneuvered skillfully around the elephants, striking at Porus's infantry and gradually weakening his lines. As the battle raged, the discipline and cohesion of Alexander's troops began to prevail over the formidable Indian forces. Porus himself fought valiantly, standing over 7 feet tall and cutting an imposing figure on the battlefield. Despite the intensity of the Macedonian assault, he held his ground, displaying exceptional bravery and resilience. His courage earned him the respect of both his own soldiers and Alexander's, who marveled at his refusal to yield. After several hours of intense fighting, Alexander's strategy and the discipline of his troops finally broke the Indian lines. Porus was wounded and surrounded, but even in defeat he retained his dignity, refusing to surrender outright. When he was eventually captured and brought before Alexander, he stood tall and unbroken, meeting the conqueror's gaze with defiance. The aftermath: respect between conqueror and king. Impressed by Porus's bravery and strength, Alexander treated him with respect and magnanimity. When Alexander asked how he wished to be treated, Porus famously replied, "Like a king." This simple, dignified answer struck a chord with Alexander, who recognized in Porus a kindred spirit, a ruler who valued honor, courage, and the loyalty of his people. Rather than treating him as a defeated enemy, Alexander restored Porus to his throne and granted him additional territories, solidifying an alliance that would strengthen his influence in India. The respect and generosity Alexander showed toward Porus were emblematic of his broader approach to leadership. By treating Porus as an ally rather than a subjugated foe, Alexander fostered loyalty and stability in the region, ensuring that his conquest would endure beyond mere military control. This act of clemency furthered his vision of a multicultural empire, where diverse cultures and traditions could coexist under his rule. The alliance with Porus also provided Alexander with valuable knowledge of the region, facilitating his continued advance into India. Porus's forces, now allies, aided Alexander's army as they navigated the complex landscape, and local leaders viewed Alexander's treatment of Porus as a sign of his respect for Indian culture and customs. Challenges and exhaustion: the army's reluctance to continue. Despite the victory at the Hydaspes, Alexander's army was reaching its limit. The campaign through India had been grueling, and many soldiers were homesick, exhausted, and wary of venturing further into unknown territory. Stories of vast, powerful kingdoms and fearsome war elephants in the lands beyond the Ganges River fueled their reluctance to proceed. The troops, who had followed Alexander faithfully for years, began to question the wisdom of further expansion. Recognizing their weariness, Alexander called a council to address their concerns. He passionately argued for the continuation of their journey, invoking their past victories and the glory of reaching the edge of the world. Yet, even his charisma and determination were not enough to sway his men. For the first time, Alexander faced a limit to his ambition, imposed not by his enemies, but by the exhaustion and resistance of his own soldiers. Reluctantly, Alexander agreed to end the campaign and turn back, marking the Hydaspes as the easternmost point of his conquests. This decision was a poignant moment in his life, symbolizing the first time he had to accept a boundary to his aspirations. The journey home, however, would prove to be as challenging as any battle, as Alexander and his army would encounter further hardships in their march back through treacherous terrain. The legacy of the Indian campaign, new ideas and a cultural exchange. The Indian campaign left a lasting impact on Alexander's empire. His encounters with Indian culture, philosophy, and military tactics enriched the cultural tapestry of his rule and left a legacy that would influence the Hellenistic world for centuries. Greek and Indian scholars began to exchange ideas, laying the groundwork for advancements in fields such as mathematics, astronomy, and medicine. The influence of Indian art and philosophy also permeated the Hellenistic world, fostering a period of intellectual and cultural flourishing. The Battle of the Hydaspes, in particular, demonstrated Alexander's ability to adapt to new challenges and his respect for valor and